Good afternoon, you wee bastards, and welcome back to War Thunder with Koala. And does it seem weird to anyone else that out of all the 5 original nations in War Thunder, the US have the smallest air tree? The UK, USSR, Germany and Japan all have 5 columns in their aviation trees, with the Russians receiving 3 fighter lines, the Germans having a dedicated heavy fighter line, the British having a separated column for their naval fighters, or the Japanese having a dedicated interceptor line. The US, however, have only 4, even though they have about the same number of aircraft overall as the other nations. That is until you get down to rank 6, where the US Air Force's F-104 starfighters sit out here on their lonesome. Well, today, we're going to fix that. So the purpose of today's video is to, I guess, normalise the US fighter tech tree by splitting the existing Air Force fighter line into 2 columns of fighters that will incorporate our F-104s, make sure all holes are filled and that BR jumps aren't significant, sort aircraft more sensibly by role and hopefully declutter the tree a little, and add a couple of new aircraft incidentally, some of which players are surprised aren't here already. Now, I know the response some people will jump on is, oh, the US doesn't need any more stuff, give some to other nations. I hear you. But some of these aircraft are necessary to add if we want this split to work, while others, like the legendary F-105 Thunder Chief, you're mad if you think they're not coming anyway. Just as long as the other nations get their fill at the same time, it's fine. If these additions are then to come to the US tech tree anyway, it's best that we think beforehand about a way to add them as seamlessly as possible, and in the process fix a sort of issue, along with having a fun discussion on a topic that I think is pretty interesting, and I hope that at the very least you lads do too. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that we do have a new publicly available community squadron for War Thunder, so if you lads want to join cults, maybe get some groups together and grind out the squadron reward vehicles, then search us up in game and make sure to join the Discord. Spots are sure to fill up quick, so get in and enjoy. So the rules are that as well as making sure we have all gaps and BRs filled in both lines, we cannot split up aircraft that directly succeeded each other. So in that regard, the P-51 Mustang, F-86 Sabre and F-100 Super Sabre must be kept in the same line, as they were all developed by North American for the same types of roles. Going into that further, we've also got aircraft like the P-36 Hawk and P-40 Warhawk to think about, and others like the Shooting Star that once again go into that category of aircraft. That gives us a solid basis for a fighter line, while on the other hand we have aircraft like the P-38 Lightning, P-61 Black Widow and F-84 Thunderjet, and to extrapolate I'm talking about aircraft specifically designed to fulfill roles outside the standard fighter class. Whether they be dedicated fighter bombers, bomber interceptors, bomber escorts or what the US refer to as penetration fighters, night fighters like the P-61, etc. These are aircraft that noticeably lean to roles outside that of a P-51 Mustang, for example. Although called upon to act in a fighter bomber or bomber escort role quite heavily, the Mustang was designed initially to be a straight-up fighter, and was enveloped into other roles later on. The P-38 Lightning, on the other hand, was designed for those roles from the get-go, as were other aircraft in this line, always meant to be a different class, even if they did end up overlapping throughout their service life. So we're going to start out with a dedicated fighter line, as that's the least complicated to talk about, with the fewest new additions that are actually important. This line will see the reserve P-26 P-shooters, and then move up to the Curtiss P-36 Hawks, nothing new yet. The Hawks, ranging from a battle rating of 1.3 to 2.3, would then move up to the P-40 Warhawks that replaced them, with the P-40E and P-40F sitting in a folder at BR 2.7. Here's where I want to suggest the first new addition that will sit in this line, which is a later variant of the Warhawk, the P-40N. The P-40N was the penultimate version of the P-40, with a more powerful engine giving it the highest speed of any model, and the greatest ground attack capability, carrying up to 2,500 pounds of bombs. The P-40N also fixed some of the instability issues associated with the earlier models, and was by far the most produced variant of the aircraft. Honestly, I'm shocked this isn't in the game already. With its improvements over the already very capable P-40F, the P-40N variant would easily fit at a battle rating of 3.3 outside the folder, which actually works well as both the P-40E and P-40N used Allison engines, while the folded P-40F used the Rolls-Royce Merlin. The P-40N would then fill the gap between our current Warhawks or Kitty Hawks and our next aircraft. Starting from battle rating 3.7, we see a clean line of P-51 Mustangs, with the earliest model being the cannon-armed variant, known simply as the P-51 in the US tree. There is also the option of the P-51B at 4.0, which was basically a P-51 D5 with only 4 machine guns, before we move up to the D5 itself. The P-51D was the main variant of the legendary aircraft, and I would suggest splitting these two aircraft up, as the D30 is a big improvement and sits at a much higher battle rating than the D5. Bringing the D30 out of the folder and making it a separate aircraft not only makes the Mustangs a more major feature in the US fighter line, as they should be, similarly to the Spitfires for the British, or the Bf-109s and 190s for Germany, and the Japanese Zeros, but it also fills the gap on our way up to the ultimate Mustang, the P-51H. After the P-51H we step into jet territory with the F-80A and F-80C shooting stars, which I once again suggest moving out of folders and making separate aircraft, both to bridge the gap in battle rating and to make up for the aircraft we've moved into the alternate line. From the F-80C at 7.7 we move up to the folder with the A5 and F-25 Sabres at battle rating 8.7, and then on up to the amazing F-86 F2, which I've also taken the opportunity to move back down into rank 5 where it should be. It's here that I'd like to suggest another aircraft, the F-86H. America never used a variant of the Sabre Dog with guns. They used the F-86D as a bomber hunter, similarly to the F-89D but with far fewer rockets, making it less effective. And then built the F-86K and F-86L for export, which is why we see them in tech trees like France, Italy and Germany. What America did use, however, is the F-86H, basically a US version of what the CL-13B is, in that it had improved performance over the earlier Sabres, and could carry 2 AIM-9B Sidewinder missiles, making it a great aircraft for BR 9.3. Now we move into supersonic jet territory, and here I also want to suggest that the US received the F-100A. The move of the French and Chinese Super Sabres down to BR 9.7 seemed to have been met with an overwhelmingly positive response from the players who fly those aircraft. Not being equipped with AIM-9Es made them substantially less effective than the US F-100D, so it was weird to have them at the same BR, and at the lower tier they get to fight against aircraft they can compete solidly with, rather than facing Mirages and F-4Es. Yeesh. Rather than take the AIM-9E away from the US F-100D so that it can make this same move down, we could instead add the F-100A at 9.7, a carbon copy of the aircraft in the Chinese tech tree, with the same AIM-9B missiles. It should be noted, however, that the F-100A is currently incorrect, being visually a carbon copy of the French F-100D without the refueling boom. In reality, the F-100A had a shorter tail fin, which made it less stable in flight and famously resulted in several crashes, hence why the F-100D got the upgrade. The F-100A, however, is lighter than its younger brother, and therefore turns tighter and climbs faster, while the D model is almost 100 km/h faster in top speed, making them balanced against each other overall. I've also taken the opportunity to move the F-100D into a folder here, as it's mainly an upgrade in missiles, something that then gets reverted with our next aircraft, so I feel like bracketing it with the F-100A fits best. From jets to supersonic jets, now up to Mark II with the F-104 Starfighters. Now, while these might seem like interceptors making you think they'd go into the other line, and this is certainly a role they were more suited to, they were actually designed as multi-role fighters, not dedicated interceptors. That might seem really strange given their tiny wings and performance, which aligns perfectly with an interceptor class, being amazing for climb and speed, but with terrible maneuverability and minimal endurance. There's not much I can say besides America. This thing was an interceptor, while this was apparently an all-weather multi-role fighter. I don't make the rules. I actually suggest putting these fighters into a folder, as the two American Starfighter variants are practically identical in all regards, and if you didn't know, Gaijin is moving them both up to BR 10.0 soon, at the time of making this video. The starfighters that currently sit at 10.0, like the Chinese model the F-104G, the Japanese F-104J, which should get the same 20G missiles the Draken has, and the F-104S in the Italian tech tree, can move up to 10.3 to keep the spacing. And this is where we really need BR decompression, but don't worry, we're going to talk about that. In the recent list of BR changes, our top ground vehicles are being moved up to a new BR ceiling of 10.7, which is an absolutely fantastic move, and one that I think we're long overdue. As of yet though, our aircraft aren't moving up, which I suspect is because we'll be getting a MiG-21 BIS, Harrier GR3, and maybe even F-14 Tomcat in the near future. However, I think our current aircraft definitely need the decompression, all nations do, and so I'm going to suggest that while the F-4C and its main competitor, the MiG-21 F-13 and Chinese J-7, sit at 10.3, the F-4E, F-4EJ, the Japanese one, and the MiG-21 MF and SMT move up to a new BR ceiling of 10.7, along with the Mirage and the Draken, and potentially the FGR-2 in the British tree if it gets some better missiles. Those AIM-9Ds are trash when compared to Magics or R-60s. That completes our baseline fighter column for now, but before we move on to our second aircraft line, I also want to quickly point out that after the F-4E at 10.7, we could see the addition of rank 7 aircraft with fighters like the F-16A, F-16C, and even the F-15 Eagle way up at BRs like 11.3 to 12.0. Although of course that's still probably 2 years away. Now moving on over to the second line we're creating, we're going to have to start by talking about some new aircraft. First off, the P-30. Not much to say about this thing, it's a twin-seat fighter with one 50 cal and two 30 cals, and given its performance it'd make for a decent 1.3 aircraft. That way players are still starting out in that 1.0 to 2.0 bracket. And I'm honestly surprised this aircraft isn't here already, because it was actually the first mass-produced fighter aircraft in the world with retractable landing gear. Developed in 1934, the P-30 also flew under the name PB-2 as a fighter bomber, hence why I think it fits as the entry to this alternate line. Succeeding it, I suggest the Republic P-43 Lancer. We already have the Lancer in-game in the Chinese tree and also as a US event vehicle as the P-43A1, which has 4 50 cals and sits at BR 2.7. But the original P-43 was equipped with 4 30 cals and would make for a good 1.7 to maybe 2.0 fighter. It'd be fast but sluggish at this BR, something a lot of the aircraft in this line have in common, and seeing as the P-47s are all going to be here, I think the US are long overdue a tech tree variant of the P-43. At 2.0 I want to suggest the Seversky P-35. Similarly to the P-36 Hawk and actually designed as a competitor to it, the P-35 focused more on speed than dogfighting capability, and also had increased firepower, with 2 50 cals and 2 30 cals. Interestingly, it was this aircraft that led to the design of the P-43, and then on to the P-47 and other aircraft like it, while its more nimble brother went the other way, becoming the P-40 and then the P-51. And the rest is history. After that, there's another aircraft which the Chinese have and the US don't, the P-66 Vanguard. I absolutely love this little 2.3 fighter, and actually have a 100% win ratio in it, after a good few matches played. Another aircraft that functions more like a muscle car than a true dogfighter, the Vanguard was used by the US Army Air Force as well as the Chinese, and featured 2 50 cals and 4 30 cals. Also at 2.3 we see the first Bell Cobras. Now, I really struggle to work out where to put these, as they're actually some of the most nimble turning-based aircraft the US have. But with their big old 30mm cannons in the nose, and the fact that many of the units who used Cobras transitioned to P-47 Thunderbolts or P-38 Lightnings, as well as their speed and the fact that they were designed to compete with the P-40, I think they belong over here rather than in the dedicated fighter line. Of course, we don't start out with a variant armed with a 37mm, but rather the P400, or the P40 with a 0 on its tail. The P400 swaps out the 37mm cannon of the main Cobras for a 20mm Hispano cannon, and sits at BR 2.3. Currently, it actually exists as a downgrade from the P40 you reach it from, but separated like this, it leads cleanly on from the P66, and from it, you research the P39 Airacobras. I think what should happen is that the 2.3 P400 should be on its own, as it was kind of a unique aircraft, while the two P39s sit in a folder at BRs 3.0 and 3.3. After the Airacobras, we see the earliest iterations of the P38 Lightning. The Lightning was an interesting aircraft, not quite a heavy fighter. It served primarily as a long-range fighter and bomber interceptor, as well as a ground attack fighter, night fighter, and what the US called a bomber pathfinder. More aggressive than a traditional bomber escort class, the job of a pathfinder was to fly slightly ahead of the bomber fleet and guide them into their targets, also clearing the skies before they got there. At battle rating 3.0 we see the P38E, and this aircraft leads to the P38G at 3.7. Once again, I think they should be separated from their folders. From the P38G we see the P63 King Cobras at 3.7 to 4.0, and then to the later variants of the Lightning, the P38J and the P38L at 4.3 and 4.7 respectively. Now this is where this line gets a wee bit muffled, because we're going from a 4.7 aircraft down to a 4.0 in the P61C Black Widow. We currently go from a 4.7 down to a 3.7 with the Thunderbolt to the P63, so I don't think this is too bad. And the reason I've organised it this way is because the Black Widow was what primarily took over from the Lightning in the specific role of night fighter, and this way we also keep all the P47s together. The P47 Thunderbolt was the heaviest American fighter of the war, heavier even than the twin-engine P38 Lightning, and saw success primarily in the fighter-bomber role, making it perfect as the signature of this line, alongside the Lightnings. Our current P47D25 sits at BR 4.3, but before that I want to point out the P47 Razorback, which players have begged for years. The Razorback variation of the legendary aircraft predates the bubble top variant we know, and because of that, you can expect less capability. The variant I want to suggest is the P47D10 for a battle rating of 4.0. The Razorback Thunderbolts suffered from compression in a dive, had worse cooling of their engines than the later iterations we see in game, and weren't as well equipped when it came to ground ordnance either. Because of this, I think the D10 is a perfect aircraft to predate the D25 and D28, and at over 9,000 produced, it does strike me as weird that we don't have a Razorback in game yet. From the folder D25 and D28, we move cleanly up to the P47N, so while the dedicated fighter line is made up predominantly of P51 Mustangs, the main features of this line are the Lightnings and Thunderbolts. So what can succeed the Thunderbolts? Well, in my opinion, the perfect option here is actually the twin Mustang, the F82E. While a Mustang in heritage, the F82 differed heavily in role, serving primarily in the Korean War as a successor to the P61 Black Widow, hence why I put it here. It was also used as a heavy escort fighter and ground attacker, so basically anything but the strict fighter class, which the P51 was initially designed for. If it still seems weird to split it from the Mustangs themselves, think about the Donya 217, ME410, Donya 335 and ME262s in the German tree, which do almost the same thing for the same reasons. Now the next aircraft we have to slot in would be the F-84B Thunderjet at 7.3, but that's a 2.3 BR gap from the F-82E, so in between I suggest the P-59B. Another tech tree variant of an event aircraft, this one was the more capable iteration of the P-59 Aerocomet. The P-59A, designed from the Bell Cobras, is more of a meme than a competitive fighter, and still makes for a deadly 5.3 aircraft in the right hands, so given some better performance that actually aligns with a proper jet, the P-59B would suit for a battle rating of 6.0. It could then slot into rank 5, as it kinda wouldn't fit nicely in rank 4, that'd be too many rank 4s in this line. If you think it weird that the Americans would get this prototype aircraft in their tech tree though, I'd counter that by saying that the US also rejected the P-63 King Cobra, calling it unsuitable for combat and only ever exporting it to nations like the Soviet Union. And they have 3 of them in the tech tree. The two Thunderjets then sit at 7.3 and 7.7, split out from their folders once again, and then could lead on to the F-94B Starfire. Again, we see an aircraft in a different line to its ancestor, as the Starfire was developed on the airframe of the F-80 Shooting Star, but with an afterburning engine and a new armament. Actually, if we want to be like that about it, it was designed from the training version of the Shooting Star, the T-33, but still. Again, however, this aircraft differed heavily in role, actually replacing the F-82, so we've got a nice little pattern going on here. While the quintessential Starfire, the F-94C, featured no guns, only rockets like the F-86D and F-89D, the F-94B was equipped with 4 50 cals in the wing roots and an additional 4 available in gun pods. This would essentially be a fatter yet faster G91, and so I think suits a battle rating of 8.7. Succeeding that could come the F-84F Thunderstreak, another aircraft I'm surprised not to see yet. Essentially a souped up version of the F-84 Thunderjet with swept wings, the F-84F was capable of over 1100 km per hour at sea level, and carried up to 6,000 pounds of bombs, 3 times that of our current F-84s. Because of that, I think a BR of 9.0 suits it well. It is a fighter bomber after all, and you shouldn't rival dedicated air superiority fighters at its same BR. For 9.7, I suggest the F-101C Voodoo, which was one of very few US aircraft that sits between Mach 1 and Mach 2. Achieving a top speed of Mach 1.7, the F-101C was also armed with 4 20mm cannons and the AIM-4 Falcon air-to-air missile. If you want to know what the Falcon would be like, think how AIM-9Bs performed when they were first introduced in patch 1.85, and these are going to be on the airframe of basically a supersonic F-3H Demon. The Voodoo was also designed for the role of bomber pathfinder, although its only capability in the fighter-bomber role was with nuclear bombs, which, even despite their comparatively small yield, we are not likely to see in War Thunder. After the Voodoo, we see the F-105D Thunderchief, the legendary Vietnam War fighter-bomber that succeeded the Thunderjet and later Thunderstreak. This is actually one of the main reasons, besides the F-104s, why I ended up making this video. I repeatedly have discussions on my Discord about where this aircraft should go when, and yes I do say when, it gets introduced, with some people saying it should fulfill the role of Tier 6 bomber, being more of a tactical bomber like the preceding B-57s, instead of the strategic bombers we see like the B-17 and B-29. I, however, disagree, as the F-105 succeeded the F-84, which, while France, Italy and China see it in their attacker lines, the Americans have it as a fighter, because that was how they used it. The F-105 was no different, and this aircraft actually achieved the most air-to-air gun kills of the whole Vietnam War. It could be argued that it suits the attacker line then, but with the F designation, I think it's more appropriate to call this thing a fighter-bomber. It obviously doesn't belong in the same line as an F-86 Sabre though, but having split up the fighters and not fighters, we now have room for the F-105 Thunderchief in this alternate line at BR 10.3, saving the attacker line for jets like the A4, A6, A7, and one day A10. And the bombers... B-1 Lancer maybe? I still say they wouldn't work at all regardless. Succeeding the F-105 would come the F-106A Delta Dart, the so-called ultimate interceptor, and the last aircraft in this line. Capable of a whopping Mach 2.3 and equipped with a 20mm Vulcan, the F-106 is an aircraft that many players have asked for repeatedly, and it'd be very interesting to see. Probably the closest thing America has to the MiG-21, the F-106 once again carried the AIM-4 Falcon, but interestingly enough, despite being used into the 70s, never saw the use of AIM-9 Sidewinders, lagging behind there a wee bit, eh? An incredibly sleek aircraft though, with a hell of an acceleration and a thrust-to-weight ratio almost identical to our 3rd generation MiG-21s. I think a battle rating of 10.7 suits the F-106, given its speed over the MiG-19S, which it would use a similar playstyle to in other regards, using its incredible acceleration and flight performance to out-gunfight arguably superior opponents like Phantoms. This was the last dedicated interceptor the US produced, and it rounds off this line and this video quite nicely. Anyway lads, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed and that you leave a like and subscribe if you did. I really think a split of the US Air Force fighter line like this should come to the game. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think the configuration I've suggested here works very well, keeps things clean and progresses in a good way. Please let me know your opinions of what I've suggested here and share this video around, get the discussion going. If you want to talk to me a wee bit more about this subject, or any others of course, I am live on Twitch right now at the link in the description below, so come follow me there, join the coalition, join Kilt Squad, and as always, please remember, keep a whiskey to hand, keep your kilt on, and I'll catch you next time. I say a wee thank you to these lads for supporting the channel on Patreon. Enrique Sun, Ian Anderson, Bluefeet, Mo, Roskill, Bias or Mover, Metallic Rain, Charts 152, Crescent, Captain Fubar, Britlander, Seagull Nuts, DA261, Latvian Wolf, Gisli Gadarson, and Dark Recon, you lads are brawl. If you want to join them, then check out Patreon at the link in the description below.